So things we're going to talk about in this video is how is $200 billion impacting the housing market, increase in inventory, and what can buyers expect with lower interest rates. Hi, I'm Danny Brown. I'm the CEO of Myriad Real Estate Group, and this is going to be our February market update. So the first month of the year is behind us, 2026, and we are firmly into Phoenix's spring selling season. So that typically gets started in kind of the second or the third week of January and really runs through the month of May, peaking in kind of March, April, May-ish, if you will. So we're in the very early innings of Phoenix's spring selling season. So currently in Phoenix, we're hovering around 18,000 active listings on the market for Maricopa County. This is actually up about 9% from this time last year. So we are seeing more people deciding to sell their homes, which is actually a good thing. I think that every year we get away from the COVID boom that we saw in housing. More and more normal people will begin to sell their home. You can only delay your life so long. You know, you've got growing families, you've got people passing away, you've got divorces, you've got job changes, all of these things, life happens, and so you need to do a real estate transaction. And so we're starting to see more and more normal people kind of do a real estate transaction, and I think 26 will be more of a trend of that. Regular people selling, moving, regardless of what mortgage rates are doing. Why are more normal people doing transactions? Well, one, like I said, we're getting further away from that COVID boom. But two, we've also seen mortgage interest rates come off their high. So if you remember, this time last year, we saw mortgage rates hovering in the low 7s. This year, they're actually hovering in the low 6s. So that's a full percentage point lower. And actually, for a brief moment in January, we actually saw rates in the 5s, where regardless of whether or not you were doing an ARM or a 30-year fixed, you were getting something with a 5 handle in front of it. Rates have still ticked up a little bit since then, but we're still in the low 6% range, which is really good for affordability. And I think that's going to bring more buyers back to the market. And remember that most sellers are buyers. So all these people that are going to be listing their home for sale are probably going to be purchasing on the other end. Most people don't sell their home to become homeless, so most sellers do become buyers on the back end. So let's get into the weeds a little bit and talk about mortgage rates and why we're at where we're at. So the first thing is that the gap between the 10-year Treasury and where mortgage rates are at, called spread, has narrowed. That's just been happening naturally over time as markets seek balance. So we're seeing that gap between the 10-year and mortgage rates narrow. The other thing that we have seen is the Federal Reserve has been cutting rates over the last year. So they've been cutting by typically 25 basis points. They're actually supposed to meet towards the end of January, where I don't think that they're going to cut rates. I think they're going to hold where they're at. But you have a lot of those rate cuts kind of baked into the system. And the 10-year Treasury, which mortgage rates are based off of, usually is looking out 6 months to a year in the future. And so that is predicting some easier monetary and fiscal policy from the federal government. Something else that we saw this month was that the federal government came out and started to do some basically light quantitative easing in the form of buying mortgage-backed securities. Now, I predicted back in, 2024, when we learned that Trump was going to be president again, that they would start doing this at some point in time where they would purchase mortgage-backed securities to help mortgage rates. I didn't think it was going to take this long for them to do that, but they finally did it in the form of $200 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities, and that caused rates to come down on that news. Now, with that being said, I think that that news was a precursor to the news that followed the next week, where the Department of Justice has decided to go after the Fed and Jerome Powell for spending too much money on a remodel. So I think they came out to soften rates, to soften the bond market, and basically put a ceiling on things by announcing that quantitative easing. So I think they did that because they knew that they were going to be doing this on the back end and that it wouldn't be favorably received. So ultimately what they did is they put a cap on where mortgage rates could go. So what does that mean for you long term? That means I do not think that we are going to get into an environment where we see mortgage rates go back into the 7s. I think we're going to stay in the 6s. I also do not think that we are going to get rates much lower than 5.75. I think that's kind of the bottom for mortgage rates. So if you were a buyer that is just sitting on the sidelines waiting for rates to continue to get lower, I don't think that they're going to break much lower than kind of where they're at. So it's better to act sooner than wait several years before we actually see that. And if we do get below 5.75 in the near term, it's not because of fiscal or monetary policy, it's because the job market broke and we are now in a full-fledged recession. That would cause mortgage rates to fall, and that's not something that we want, and that's something that the federal government's probably going to work to try to avoid. We don't want to see a job loss recession, so I'm predicting, and I think that rates will stay in that high 5, low 6% range for the foreseeable future. So we are seeing listing inventory increase, as we typically do this time of year. And typically shortly after that, we see buyer activity pick up. We have not seen that buyer activity really pick up yet. I'm not too worried about it. I think that it will follow. It usually takes people having the conversation after the holidays, speaking with the lender, getting pre-qualified, going out to look at homes. That's why we typically start to see contracts peak in March, April, May. So if new listings are going to market in January and February, we start to see those go under contract and close like 30 days later. So I'm starting to see some pockets of activity on our own listings where we're seeing increased showings. Other listings, super quiet. So it's really hit or miss right now. And just because we're into 2026, we did not see a deluge of buyers all of a sudden enter the market. This is really, kind of a continuation of what we saw in 2025, where you can expect homes to be listed from somewhere between, 2 to 3 months. So we're looking at 60 to 90 days on average to sell a home. That's perfectly normal. That's what we want. We want people to have time to be able to think about things and not have to rush out and buy a home and make a decision before they're really ready. Having days on market be in the teens is not favorable for anybody. And so having a healthy real estate market where it's taking 2 to 3 months to sell a house is perfectly normal and what we want. The other thing to remember is we just finished the month of January. The first month of the year is behind us. So we're just into 2026. I know that it felt like a lot longer because there is so much happening in the world and so much noise coming at us from so many different directions, and it's really hard to pay attention to all of it. And it feels like we're cramming so much into a short period of time because we are. But remember, we are only 30 days into the year, and so buyers will return to the market. So if you are a seller and it's taking some time, I always preach this. When it comes to selling a home in this market, it comes down to price, presentation, and this is the big one, patience. Just be patient. People will come, people will view your home, and people will start buying property. As long as you're priced right, as long as you're presented well, that third one is super, super crucial to have patience. So what can sellers expect right now is it's still going to be relatively slow because that buyer activity has not quite returned yet, but it's still early days. So if you're averaging 1 showing a week, you're doing well, and that's on a single family home. Townhome or condo, if you're averaging 1 showing every 2 to 3 weeks, you're doing very well. So just, sit tight, don't make any rash decisions. And again, price it well. So you need to be priced accurately. Buyers are not in a hurry. They're being extremely choosy. I had 2 listings where we were the second choice this weekend from buyers. Super disappointing. The buyers came back and saw the home multiple times. And unfortunately, we weren't number 1 because they had options. We were number 2 on their list. So it's going to take time to sell your home. It needs to be presented well. So proper staging, really high-end photos, curb appeal matters. Make the home look as good as it possibly can. And if you can't, then you have to improve the price. If you don't want to improve the price, then you have to improve the presentation. And then you've got to have that patience to allow the market to work, recognizing that it's going to take 60 to 90 days to sell that home. Remember that buyers are asking for concessions. It is pretty normal right now for a seller to still help a buyer with their closing costs, right? So their lender fees, their title fees. It's really normal for a seller to do some repairs or offer credits in lieu of repairs. So buyers are willing to buy, but as a seller, you have to be willing to give in order to attract that buyer. And that is in the form of concessions. That is in the form of doing repairs when they ask for them. So just be ready for it when you receive an offer. If they're asking you for, somewhere between 1.5% to 3% in concessions, that's fairly normal in the environment that we're in right now. If you're a buyer, what can you expect as we go forward? Do not expect interest rates to fall precipitously, right? I think the floor on interest rates is going to be around 5.75. We're in the low sixes right now. So in my mind, that is close enough to make a move. And right now you are facing less competition. You are facing the ability to get those sellers to cover your closing costs, to do repairs. I just closed one where we were able to get the seller to replace a buyer's entire roof. It was $18,000, and the seller went ahead and paid for it through the proceeds of their sale in order to close on that transaction. So sellers are willing to do the things in order to get their home sold. That does start to disappear as more buyers return to the market. So if you're in this position where you can afford to buy today, but you're thinking you want to wait for rates to come down even more, I think you're going to be waiting for a really long time. I just do not see an environment in which we see rates falling below that 5.75 range. So get in the market, get in early before more and more people start to get into the market in that mid-spring cycle. Take advantage of the extra choices and take advantage of the ability to negotiate as well. As a reminder, do a real estate transaction when you feel ready. Don't feel pushed into doing something before you are ready to pull the trigger. I'm a big proponent of that do it when you are financially ready to do it. That's what makes the most sense for you. If you have any questions about the housing market, any comments, leave them below. Don't forget to give a like and subscribe, and I will see you next month.